suggesting to the court that the sins of hypocrisy could be atoned for by further hypocrisy on an even grander scale. So how might one decide how to influence God? Wouldn't you start with how you might influence another person? And so people began giving their gods things that were precious to them, assuming that such offerings would make God happy. And what are our most precious things? Well, that would be the cream of the crop, the best food, or the very best, the most precious of all, one's very offspring, one's children. Therefore, child sacrifice was begun. And that brings us to the focus this morning. What in the world does God want of us, for heaven's sake? People down through the centuries have asked that question. They struggled with it. Moses was given the Ten Commandments, pretty straightforward. And then we started writing laws to clarify it. What does God want from them? What would what would make God smile on them? And finally, in the fullness of time, God sent us Jesus to make it clear that God wants us not to obey a list of laws, no matter how correct. Rather, what God wants is that we love God with our whole being, that we love our neighbors near and far, and ourselves. Everything else is fine for him. And Jesus lived out that kind of life before the people of his time. It's worth noting that in this statement of faith, two of the parts deal with our relationship with people. And one part deals with our relationship to God. This is because it is rather futile to talk about God unless we come to respect the men and women that God created in his image. In 1 John 4:20, the writer says, we are not likely to love God, whom we have not seen, unless we come first to love our fellow human beings, whom we have seen. And Micah begins with do justice. In its strictest sense, justice means fair play. It means making sure that all God's children inherit their fair share of God's good gifts, and if they don't, because someone has swindled them out of his birthright, or because they're too weak to protect it, then we come along and help out. Justice means doing whatever is necessary to sort out what belongs to and whom to return it to them. Dynamic concept that God calls for people to work on for fairness and equality for all, particularly the weak and powerless who are exploited by others. And Micah encourages something similar, only the attitude he pairs with justice is kindness, compassion, or loving kindness, as the Hebrew word here is cheese, is frequently rendered. Cheese is difficult to translate with any single English word. It's the idea of how do we look through somebody's eyes or put yourself in their shoes. And it was simple for them because they understood that well, because God always treated them that way. God always acted toward the people in loving kindness. So too, God expected them to act in the same way toward one another. We are also to do justice, and justice is a much larger, more complicated concept of kindness. Kindness is an individual act. I see a person in need, and like the Good Samaritan, I try to help. It is the passion that followers of Jesus have for making certain that every person on earth has a decent opportunity for a healthy, wholesome, rewarding life. There, my friends, is the difference between acts of kindness and doing justice. Kindness is giving Christmas presents to disadvantaged boys in coal mines. Kindness is giving their families turkeys during the holiday season. And kindness is praying for them. Doing justice is working to change the laws so that it is illegal for little boys to work in the coal mines in the first place. I fear that we, as a church, are content to be kind. Kindness is great. It is the first step in following Jesus. But it is only the beginning of that journey. It is the bare minimum. We are to love kindness, but we are also to do justice. Justice and loving kindness, critical to the living of lives that are pleasing to God. But one can be just without being religious, and one can be kind without any religious inclination. That is why Micah says real religion requires one more thing, a humble walk with God. What does God require of you and me but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? Few characteristics are as appealing in a person as genuine humility. However, here Micah is talking about a special kind of humility. It is like unto the meekness of Jesus. Praise when he said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Jesus was not talking about the shy, timid mouse of a person who is content to serve as the world's doormat. Rather, he is talking about people who are so committed to serving God and serving other people that they have an astounding impact on our world. Do, love, walk. That's God's short list. Notice they're all action words. They're all verbs and imperative verbs at that. They're verbs that is inevitable. Ask the questions, what, how, and who. What are you doing? How and who are you loving? And how and with whom are you walking? One of the mistakes we make is in thinking that life has to be fair. Justice is not about being fair. There is a story told about a well-known crime figure who was on trial for first-degree murder. His lawyer was hired and paid to win this case for at least reduce the charge. Everybody knew he had done it. It was pretty clear he was guilty, but the lawyer was willing to do whatever it took to reduce the charges. The lawyer approached one of the jurors and was able to bribe him to hold out for the verdict of manslaughter. He impressed upon the juror that no other verdict would do, or he wouldn't get paid. At the end of the trial, the jury deliberated for over a week. They finally returned a verdict of manslaughter. When the lawyer met with the juror to pay the bribe, he asked, "How did you convince the other jurors to reduce the charge to manslaughter?" The juror answered, "Well, that's not exactly what happened. You told me to get them to return a verdict of manslaughter or I wouldn't get paid. It took me the whole week to convince them to vote with me on that verdict. They all wanted to acquit him." Sometimes God takes care of justice, but you and I are called to do justice, to walk humbly with God, in fellowship with God, in modesty and without arrogance. This is the very heart of everything in God's purpose for us, that we live in close relationship with God. To walk humbly with God means we must understand that God is in control. It means we have to understand we're all sinful human beings who have made wrong choices, but we have been forgiven. We deserve justice, but through Christ's sacrifice on the cross, we've received mercy. How we live is a response to our experience of God's mercy. Years ago, there was a wise and just ruler who established a series of laws for his people to follow. And they were good laws, although sometimes difficult to follow. One day, his own mother broke one of the laws and was brought to the ruler. The penalty for breaking this particular law was 20 lashes. It put him into a quandary. How could the ruler remain just and be the ruler of the kingdom and still fulfill the demands of his love for his mother? He thought and he prayed about it, and then on the day of his mother's punishment, this ruler took the lashes on his own back, and in so doing justice was satisfied, and his deep love for his mother was both honored and revealed in full measure. So what's that mean for us? For the last 3 weeks, Chad's been talking about 3 things: together, grow, and serve. If you look on the back of the scripture this morning, there's lots of questions for you. And we're called together to love one another, to comfort one another. We're called to grow in our love for God and walk humbly with Him. And we're called to serve those around the world who need our help.